Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be discussing the 4 universal firearm safety rules. These rules have been around for quite a while. They apply everywhere you go. It doesn't matter if you're walking through downtown Manhattan, you're at the gun range practicing shooting, you're hunting, or you're kicking indoors in Iraq or Afghanistan. These rules are universal and they apply everywhere you go. Anything extra is just icing on the cake. So before we get into these rules, we're going to talk about why they are important and some of the history behind them. So these rules used to be called Cooper's gun safety rules because Jeff Cooper is really the one who kind of patented the idea. If you know anything about guns, you've probably heard Jeff Cooper at some point in your life. Jeff Cooper is basically the father of modern pistol craft, and he came up with these 4 universal rules back in about the late 70s, early 70s. So these rules apply everywhere you go. So let's break into this, discuss what those 4 rules are. So here we're going to be using basically, it's a Glock blue gun that is actually orange. So it is a demo gun. It's just a chunk of plastic, but we can do a lot of stuff with this gun that we would not do with the actual gun to demonstrate those safety rules. So we're going to show you this here. So the first universal firearm safety rule is number 1, treat all guns as if they are loaded. The reason this is important is because guns are not toys. You need to treat them as such. You need to treat them as if they're loaded. Think of it as when you pick this gun up, it should be ready to shoot. And that's how you should be treating it. Number 2, never point the muzzle at anything you're not willing to destroy. And always keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction. So what that means is think of this muzzle as having a laser beam coming out of it. So you don't want that muzzle crossing anything that you do not want to get shot or destroyed. Because that could be property, that'd be the best case scenario if you had an ND, or the worst case is life. You don't want to be destroying or killing innocent life that you should not be, because 1, that's going to be on you, 2, that ruins their life, and 3, that's also probably going to ruin your life if you do have an accidental homicide. So that's what happens if you have a negligent discharge. Now something we hear with this is, oh, the gun's unloaded. If someone gives you that response, refer back to rule number 1, because whether this gun is unloaded or not, so you should always treat this gun as if it's loaded. So if someone says, oh, it's unloaded, doesn't matter, should be still treating it the same. That means you also do not want that muzzle crossing your hand. Something I see a lot of times while working at a gun store is someone picks up a gun and they start looking at it like this here. That's in a clear violation of that second rule and basically that first rule too, because right here, looking at it like this, you're obviously pointing it at your hand, and this is something I really do not want to lose. I am pretty fond of my left hand and my right hand. I like my hands, so don't shoot your hands off. Number 3, keep your finger off trigger until your sights are aligned on target and you're ready to shoot. So what does that mean? That means you do not want your finger resting like this. A lot of times I see people, they'll pick up a gun and they instantly put their finger in there, and this is how they hold it. That is a no-go. You do not want to do that. That will instantly get you kicked off of range most places, and that's how you get negligent discharges. These guns do not go off unless you pull trigger, which means you don't want your finger in there pulling that trigger or anything else pulling that trigger. So that's why you need to maintain that good finger discipline. So it means don't be leaving your finger in there. Even right here, you can see my finger is not actively touching that trigger, but still in the trigger guard. So you don't want your finger anywhere near that trigger guard. So you really want it resting on that frame. That's about as low as I'd go. I like going as high as possible, so I really push that up there pretty high. That way I make sure and guarantee my finger is high off that trigger. And it's a safety thing. As you're coming up on target, there, when your sights are aligned, then you can start prepping that trigger and getting on target at a high ready here. When you bring that up here, you can go on target. And when you're down, you need to make sure your finger is high off that trigger. Number 4, always be sure of your target and what's around it. So that means, so we got 2 targets here. If my target's here, I'm shooting at this target, I gotta make sure there's nothing behind it, because if the bullet does go through, we don't want it hitting that target here. We also gotta make sure there's nothing around it. If you're having to take a longer shot and there's something to the left or right of your target, and you know you have a probability of missing because it's a hard shot to make it that distance, you gotta be aware of that. You want to make sure there's nothing around that target that you could also shoot. Here we've just been using a blue gun. Something people will say is, I don't need those safety rules because I have a safety. So this gun here is unloaded. Okay, it's a Beretta 92 FS. It has a thumb safety. It's a frame mounted safety. So something I hear a lot is, I don't need those rules because I have a manual safety. Well, this gun here has a manual safety too. It doesn't matter, folks. I got to maintain the same rules whether I'm using a gun with a manual safety or I'm using a Glock here that does not have a manual safety. The rules still apply. These guns don't go off unless you pull trigger. Those manual safeties do not make up for poor firearm safety rules. So again, another gun here. So same thing, if I'm running a rifle, I gotta maintain that trigger discipline. Yes, we have a safe location over here. Whether I'm at the range shooting, home defense, those rules still apply. Another popular one. I'm out hunting. I don't need those rules. There's no one else around me. Guess what? It still applies. The reason why it's just those 4 universal rules, or those are the main bread and butter. Anything above and beyond that might be icing on the cake. You'll see a lot of manufacturers, they'll have 10 safety rules, they'll have 12 safety rules. You might go to a range and they have 20 safety rules, 30 safety rules. Those are just absurd. Anything like that is range etiquette or just common knowledge. Those 4 rules though, those don't matter where you go. They apply every single place you go, and you really got to follow them. If you don't, you might get kicked off the range, or worse, it could cause great bodily harm or death to someone else or yourself. So you really got to maintain those rules.